Y'all scared to sit up too, or what? Everybody's in the back.
You're on. I had a hard weekend.
We'd like to call to order the June 7th, 2016 Strategic Planning Committee meeting. We're going to have an invocation and a pledge, which we haven't discussed. And so I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and ask Mr. Dawson if he'd lead us, and if everyone please rise and remain standing for the pledge.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity to gather again as a community. Please offer us your guidance, dear Heavenly Father. Thank you for the people that we have in here tonight that have risked their lives on a volunteer basis for the betterment of the community. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Madam Secretary, let the record show all members of the committee are present. And with that, item number 3 is the public comment period. Anybody wishing to address this committee tonight on our loan issue, which is going to be a discussion of the burn ordinance for Ascension Parish, please check with, it's not Jessica tonight, but with Cinnamon, and you'll be given your 3 minutes to speak. Cinnamon, do you have any cards?
Y'all gonna speak? One of y'all gonna speak, Jay?
Well, gentlemen, why don't y'all just we'll come on up, and you can sign a card after you speak, so it doesn't hold anybody up, and just state who you are for the record, and we want to thank you for coming. There was some clamor back in antechambers that maybe everybody wasn't invited. I thought everybody was, at least my fellow committee members that were supposed to do that are telling me that they did so. So if we did slight you as a committee, I personally offer you an apology. We want all the firefighters here. And maybe by way of introduction, let me just say this. You know, why are we here before we hear from our various fire chiefs? I know in my district, and I wouldn't say to a lesser extent perhaps because I don't get his mail on Mr. Lawless district, and Ms. Cassell's not here. Up in 70769 in Prairieville, everybody knows that we're getting denser and denser all the time, and more subdivisions are being built. And I receive a significant number of complaints, most recently development off of Highway 73, little 200 home site rooftop situation where people were complaining vigorously to me, Doc, you got to do something. The fire's been burning for days and days. The smoke is causing my asthmatic child problems. I have to get my swimming pool clean. I have to pay to have my house power washed with all the cinders. I did, in that particular case, and even some others, speak to Chief Stewart, I guess it was, and he says, Doc, certainly I can come out there and put the fire out, but instead of it smoking for just a few days, it's going to smoke for quite a longer period of time than that. It then dawned upon me that we didn't even have a burn ordinance for the Parish of Ascension. The city of Gonzales, by the way, does. And fellow committee members, that burn ordinance is in your packet, along with a proposed, and I want to emphasize that, ordinance. Nothing is set in stone. This committee, again, just makes recommendations to the larger body, the full council, all 11 of us, ordinance for the Parish of Ascension. So that is a problem. I might want to also make one more prefacing comment, and we'll have the fire chiefs come on up, and it's this. During the week, I published the Strategic Planning Committee agenda, and lo and behold, I find myself 30 to 40 comments later, people pretty much lined up, 50% of the people wanting a burn ordinance, and no surprise, it's those that are in the more dense areas, versus those in the parish who have burned all their lives in the lesser dense areas who want to continue to have that privilege. And I don't believe anyone in this committee tonight is here to try to, the word's been bandied around that we're trying to put in a burn ban ordinance. Nowhere in the ordinance is the word ban used. What we're trying to do is ensure that where burning is going to continue to be allowed, if it's the pleasure of this committee to adopt a law, it's done so responsibly, and that's an important reason for having our fire chiefs here tonight, so they can address that and any questions anybody might have on it. I want to make some comments, though, for those who think it's totally unneeded because there's no jeopardization, if you will, of the health, safety, and welfare of the people. And I don't know a great deal about this, but I tried to do some homework during the day by looking at other state ordinances and as well as counties and parishes in our own state and municipal ordinances and so forth. And I see all kinds of material that shows, and I'll just give you a few examples, that smoke inhalation and so forth by fires is a real problem. I'll quote you something from a national site. What are the health concerns associated with open burning? The answer, the air pollutants produced by burning wood and vegetative material alone. And it gets worse when you're burning other trash, particularly plastics and stuff, where you have PCBs and you have mercury and you have lead and all kinds of other chemical carcinogens that are getting up into the air vapor mixture. But just wood and vegetative material, it says, can irritate the eyes, nose, lungs, pose a threat to those who suffer from asthma and other respiratory conditions. These pollutants have been linked to several health problems, including severe nervous system damage, kidney failure, liver damage, and reproductive and developmental disorders. Smoke from burning household trash, this is beyond vegetative matter, including plastic containers, is more toxic than smoke from burning clean wood. That's understandable. Studies have found dioxins, arsenic, mercury, chromium, PCBs, lead, other dangerous chemicals in smoke from burning household trash. Serious health effects can be caused by harmful chemicals from burning these items commonly found in household trash. Therefore, protecting your health is worth a small fee for proper waste disposal, and there are other alternatives to burning. That's, of course, an opinion, and we'll see how that plays out. But I think it's clear, if we're here to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens, that is our charge as elected officials. Smoke inhalation is unhealthy. With that, fellas, which one of you guys would like to address the committee first? And we'd love to hear from you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members. Thanks for inviting us. I know I did get a phone call about a week ago. Again, I was just asked to, if I would, to attend tonight. I said that I would. Again, I didn't really know what we were going to be asked or what we were needed here for. I just got a little more info about an hour and a half ago. I didn't realize an ordinance had been drafted or anything else. I thought this meeting was maybe to start a dialogue about a burn ordinance, ban, whatever it was going to be. So, I mean, we really don't know a whole lot about it. I've tried to spend a little bit of time looking at it. Basically, it just mirrors what's written in the state law. Other than one place, I see one change. And again, to me, most of those things, all they're going to do is just open up a hornet's nest. If somebody has an acre, it's all right for them to burn. So who's going to do the measuring, and who's going to tell somebody that has 3/4 of an acre? You can't, and the whole thing turns down to, even if you have an acre, if you got 20, smoke moves. When smoke goes to that 200 home neighborhood, whether it's 2 acres away, half a mile away, and the people start complaining, person burning is in compliance. What's the matter? What are they doing wrong? Nothing. They're burning some limbs, burning some twigs, burning some leaves, but it's bothering the people that want to sit outside and enjoy a barbecue or an evening by the pool. We understand all that. You know, I came from East Baton Rouge Parish. Years ago, they put a complete burn ban in. Most of your larger municipalities have some type of burn ban, certainly strict regulations. This was attempted about 8-9 years ago, almost again verbatim in the verbiage in what was written back then. As Councilman Sadley said, the people that live in a little more rural, a little more open areas, been here all their lives, certainly have an issue with somebody trying to tell them they can't burn the limbs and twigs and leaves and maybe even a little household garbage out there on their 20 acres or whatever it might be. People that have come from the larger metropolitan areas that have moved into this area, move into the subdivisions, whether it be small subdivisions, large subdivisions. A lot of them came from areas where burning was banned, and so this is kind of new to them. You know, they haven't either never been dealing with this, or it's been many, many years since they have. And, you know, a lot of people are set in their ways, and they don't want people to be able to burn around them. I know in the evening time when the thermal inversion comes down and it holds smoke down low. People trying to enjoy, those 2 or 3 days here where it's comfortable to sit outside, and, the neighbors burning some leaves makes it a little unbearable. You can't open the windows in your house on a decent evening to let it air out because the smoke's coming along. So I just, again, very, very short amount of time to look at this, but I don't know what and who the enforcement's going to be. But as Councilman Sally mentioned, when people do subdivision preparation and they burn, that's allowed in here as long as they meet the few criteria that allows them to do it. Well, I can tell you, smoke's going to move. Smoke's going to get eventually to some subdivision somewhere, no matter where it is, and people are going to call and complain. If the people are in compliance, what are you going to do? And the problem gets to be is when you light a 50 by 70, 30-foot high pile of trees, the ordinance says it's supposed to be between 8 and 5, and they're supposed to size the piles to make sure it's reduced before nightfall. Who's going to go out and make sure they're doing that? Who's going to go in the middle of the night when the good citizen drives by and sees a huge fire several hundred yards off the road and think it's a house on fire? They call 911. We have to go out there, and it turns out it's just a pile of trees burning. And as I told Councilman Sally one time when he called, when that gets to burning like that and it's that hot, most of these things are taking place off-road. We can't bring fire trucks off-road. We can't put enough water on it to totally put this thing out. And then, as you know, if you've ever been around any kind of fire, when you wet it and it's still smoldering, what does it produce? Tons of smoke that's even worse than it was by letting it free burn. So you got a quandary out here, and I'm not against, as a fire chief, working towards something because, as you say, I know a lot of people want it and a lot of people don't. It would be helpful to us, but the problem is going to be that enforcement and making sure somebody is really getting out there beforehand and monitoring these things and making sure they are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I know some others may want to speak, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions y'all may have of me.
Thank you, Chief Stewart. And if you don't mind staying up there, maybe we would ask you some questions first and then bring the other chiefs forward. You mentioned the 1,000 specifically foot clause that's in this proposed ordinance that Mr. Parrington has drafted for us as being problematic because smoke moves. What I captured here, eventually it's going to get somewhere, and I think you mean there by that more than 1,000 feet away. And who's going to police that? And a lot of the fires you said were off-road, and you can't get trucks on it, and even if you put enough water on it, the things you had told me with Dutchtown of Hollow seem to be extant. It's going to smoke even worse. That said, let me ask you, I did a little research this morning. There was an open burning workshop recently put out by the DEQ and the fire folks in the state, and there was a PowerPoint thing, and number 9, the 9th slide in there was something called Exceptions to Prohibition from Open Burning, subsection D of our state law. And it says this, sir. Number 6, outdoor burning of trees, brush, grass, and other vegetative matter for land clearing and the right-of-way maintenance operations, for land clearance and right-of-way maintenance operations, can be done if the following conditions are met. And they list 6. All 6 of which I see in this proposed law that Mr. Parrington is talking about, one of which is this 1,000 feet from a dwelling not located in a property. And these same ones I see in the Gonzales ordinance that's in Commissioners in all your packets this afternoon, that you have to pay attention to the winds, which I think that's what you're saying can cause the smoke to go anywhere from the point source, and particularly paying attention that it's not traveling in a direction toward a town or city. That you need to minimize dirt on the material being burned. It doesn't explain that, but I guess that means it smokes even worse if it has mud in it.
It doesn't allow it to free burn. It condenses it. Dirt doesn't burn.
Right.
So
you can't use heavy oils, items containing natural or synthetic rubber. And one of the complaints I get a lot is that, Doc, these developers, clear cut this for the subdivision, and all of a sudden a bunch of tires show up in a lot that wasn't there before. So any non-plant material that would produce unreasonable amounts of smoke under the 4th heading there is prohibited. Burning conducted between 8 and 5. And I got to tell you, Chief, I got blowback on that on my Facebook site. So you're telling me I get a ticket if I'm doing this at 5:05, even with the point you made, which is in the ordinance, also in the Gonzales ordinance, is word for word. You called it sizing the piles that you can burn between 8 and 5. And then 6, last but not least, is it can't cause a traffic hazard. So really, if this law is adopted, and I don't want to go say for the record, I'm not here promoting that we have a burn ordinance. I'm here saying that I'm getting a lot of calls, and it's something we should discuss. And again, it either comes out of this committee or it doesn't. And I'm frankly quite disappointed. I see all the fire folks here. Unless I'm mistaken, I don't have any cards from the public, and all kinds of people were lighting me up during the week. And I'm going to tell you, if y'all watching at home, where are you? Where are you? But having said all that, do you have any recommendation? Because the two biggest things I did see on my internet site was 1,000 feet, as you've already talked about, and the other, I don't think you did, sir, was the 1 acre requirement. People are concerned that, and I did a little bit, tiny research there. An acre is about 45,000 square feet. So if we look at all these homes, for example, in my district off of 73, and we're dealing with, I don't know, Seven Oaks, Longwood, whatever. I don't know what the average lot size is. I don't have a planning director here.
They're not an acre.
But probably around, let's say, 70 feet by 150 foot lot. If you want to make the math easy, we'll round it off to 100 by 150. That's 15,000 square feet. It's about a third of an acre. So we could lower that, but you still wouldn't get to a point to where these people would be allowed to burn. And actually, that's the whole reason about, that's not even a developer problem there. Let me go on the record to say that. I do get a lot of calls, too, about people that just don't like their neighbors burning too close to their house and smoking them up as well beyond their barbecue. And so the acre's an issue. If you had your druthers, so here's the question. Hate to put you in the spot. The two most controversial things that I've received, plus the penalty phase, and we'll get to that shortly. I think our current proposal is $25 first strike. Help me, fellas, at 50 or 100 second strike.
100 and then 500.
500 for the third strike and or 30 days in jail. I noticed Gonzales has 560 days in jail, so they went pretty strict on it. Now, I do know from legal counsel, who can't be here tonight, apologize for that, but O'Neill said, Doc, I have no problem if y'all want to adjust the penalty phase. But I was not able to ask him about the 1,000 feet or the acre. So if it was your druthers, can we still have a reasonable law that would be fair to the vast majority or most of the people adjusting either or both? Because those, in my mind, interact relative to what you can do.
Councilman, from the fire chief's side of things, obviously, if there's no burning, that cuts down on some call volume for us. It makes things a whole lot easier. But again, what we see, and I think what you're hearing, and maybe some of the other councilmen are too, it's not always, or most of the time, it's not the distance. And what it turns out to be is it's no difference than if one neighbor's complaining because you're playing your music too loud. It's the same thing. These are disputes, and they're not handled by fire service. We have no law enforcement capabilities. So I think as long as you have people living in close proximity to each other, and you have somebody that doesn't like the burning, doesn't like the smoke, they may just not like it because they don't think that ought to be done in a subdivision that they live in. That's just that ought to be done out in the country, not in my subdivision. So again, people can be following the rules, and what's going to happen, though, is you're still going to have those complaints. Councilman Satterley is still going to get phone calls because somebody is burning, and they're meeting the criteria, but that person just don't think burning ought to take place, and you're going to get called about it. We're going to get called, and we're going to go out there, and unless it's endangering or threatening something, we don't have the authority to go on those people's property and just squirt the hose and put their fire out. So there again, it comes back to the enforcement and stopping some of these things before they happen is where you're going to get with it. Because, let's face it, even in Prairieville, your district, Councilman Lawler's, Councilwoman Casso's, in that area, we still have a lot of places that they have bigger than 1 acre lots, even in subdivisions. And, then again, you have some that aren't exactly in subdivisions, but they might be right directly next to it. So the 1,000 feet thing was something that came into play. That was adopted into the Clean Air Act and Rules of DEQ some years back. It wasn't always there. And what it's to do is, if your house is 20 feet away from that pile and you want to take that chance, well, but the neighbor we're not gonna let you get too close to the neighbor's house and do this burning. So, you know, I think if you start getting much more than 1,000 feet, then you just pretty much gonna have to cut it out altogether. And I think if you make it less than 1,000 feet, you're not gonna help as far as the people being exposed and gonna be the complaint calls and that kind of stuff. The 1 acre, you know, I think it's nice because you give a little leeway to some people to do it, but again, what I see is even in that neighborhood where they have 1 acre lots, if somebody in there doesn't like burning.
Well, is 1 acre arbitrary? I hate to interrupt, sir.
You know.
We're not supposed to make arbitrary, capricious, or unreasonable decisions.
And I don't know, because again, we weren't involved in any of the draft and any of the writing of this ordinance, so I don't know where the acre came from. Maybe.
It's in every statute I read, and so is the 1,000 feet. All across, it's pervasive, it seems like.
Well, and like I say, the 1,000 feet is in the DEQ. I don't believe they have
1,000 feet is.
I don't believe they have a 1 acre.
No, not the 1 acre.
They don't have a 1 acre thing in anything I've ever seen.
Right, the state,
The 1,000 feet
the 1,000
is
feet
state.
is, and 1 acre, to be clear. Okay,
So
it's
the
not.
the 1 acre, I'm not sure exactly, and maybe it was to give more people the opportunity to burn in some of those, even maybe subdivisions where they have much larger lots.
Well, let me make a comment about that, and please, don't anybody throw stones. This comes from Florida, but it's called the required setbacks in their law for yard waste burning. And they start with the fact that your burn pile at your residence in a subdivision cannot exceed an 8-foot diameter ring. So they even talk about the size of that fire. And if you're doing an 8 foot or less, you need to be 25 feet from your own house. You need to be 25 feet from any, and it's arrows in all directions, wildlands, brush, or combustible structures. You need to be 50 feet from a paved public road, and you need to be 150 feet from other occupied buildings. So if we have 1,000, I guess the complaint that I'm hearing is that, again, let's go to that 15,000 square foot guy, and he's got his house dead center in the middle, he's got a little backyard, and nobody's burning on their front lawn yet. So he goes in the back and he lights a fire. You know, he's going to be, regardless of the prevailing wind or anything, going to be in violation really quick when he lights that fire.
Well, I think two things in here that may be getting confused. 1,000 foot applies to land clearing, not you burning limbs and vines in your backyard.
Thank you, Chief.
Those are two completely different things. 1,000 foot applies to land clearing, brush burning, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Not if Councilman Sarley wants to burn a little trash in
So
his
all the other
backyard.
stuff that's in the ordinance that talks about weenie roast and barbecues and campfires and ritual ceremonial fires, that everybody's going to be still cool there. I want that in the record.
Again, all of that's allowed, so, you know, in the ordinance. But I think the biggest thing is, you know, some of our bigger concerns is things like asking and making sure, put something in that people have a hose pipe or something out there, that it's manned or monitored. I shouldn't say manned, but that somebody's monitoring it the whole time it's burning. But again, there's no way to go out there and make sure of that. You can't go to all of these places where people are burning and station somebody to make sure they're following the rules. And then when they don't, and it catches their fence or their house, that's when we get called and we get out there and we put it out for them, and then they're like, I can't believe that happened. I can't believe I let that happen. Well, did you have a water hose? No. Were you watching it? Well, for a little while, and I got bored, and I went inside to watch the ball game. And so there's not a whole lot you can do about that. But the biggest thing is safety when doing it. The things you're talking about in Florida, 8 foot, no larger, that's all great. And those are good things that people should look at when you're doing burning around your house. But as I said, it all boils back to, even if you're doing that, you're following the law, and you're doing what the ordinance says you have to do. But if somebody doesn't like it and they call and complain, we get called and we go out there, and that's not what we're here to handle, you know. And so that's something that somebody with law enforcement has to enforce, has to go out there and work out the spat between the neighbors. And then what normally happens is then they'll call us. If they determine it should be put out, we'll go put it out. But I think that's your biggest thing. You got a lot of people out here that still want to burn, and you have a lot of people out here that don't want people to burn. And they're in close proximity to each other.
And the final thing, I'm going to turn it over to the committee. I promised this person I would read their comment because they said they couldn't make it here tonight. This comes from Darren Cavalier. Hope I pronounced that correctly, on June 2nd. Doc, and certainly it's not my intention to do anything to firefighters in their training, but this person apparently knows something about that and says so in their comments. Doc, upon reviewing the proposed ordinance, it is my opinion the following should be removed or amended. Section C7B, which pertains to training of firefighting personnel. Most volunteer fire departments must conduct their training exercises after 5 p.m. And of course, we at 8 to 5. Now, that is in the state as well, and it's in the Gonzales ordinance. To allow firefighters who have full-time employment to attend their training. In my opinion, this should be extended to no later than 10 p.m. at night. What's your opinion, sir?
Well, I think he's absolutely correct, especially volunteers. A lot of times, the only place and time they can get together is after that 5 o'clock p.m. And I don't know for sure, but my guess would be most live burning is done at a training facility. But if there was some opportunity to do some kind of live burning for a volunteer department, I would think, as it says in there, they contacted a regional manager with DEQ. I think potentially they might be able to get a waiver for a particular instance to do some type of live burning, maybe after that 8 to 5 time frame.
Okay. I've kind of lost track of who's first, but if the committee will be. God will get you, Mr. Dawson. For want of a better way of doing this, we'll just kind of maybe start with Mr. Lawler and go across my back from left to right.
I don't mean to interrupt. Chief LeBlanc has another meeting after this one.
Did y'all want to do it that way? That's fine.
If we could let
That's
him
fine
go
with the
ahead
chair.
and do that, and if anybody else has
Mr.
other
LeBlanc,
meetings,
would you
they
come
can.
forward, sir? And thank you, Chief Stewart.
So let me, for the people that don't think, Councilman Lawler might be the only guy up here that probably doesn't know me, so I'll do a quick introduction. This January, I started my 30th year as a fire chief in Ascension Parish, so I've been doing this just about my whole entire life. I'm also 26 years on the Fire District Number 1 Board of Directors, which represents 77% of the firefighters on the East Bank, which is all the volunteer fire departments on the East Bank. The people you see in the room tonight are people that are on my committee, on Fire District Number 1's committee, and they were here because I called them and told them this was on the agenda tonight. So kudos to Councilman Johnson. Thank you so much for calling today. I'm not here tonight to talk about whether I'm for this ordinance or whether I'm against this ordinance. I'm here to show my displeasure that this ordinance has made it this far in this council without the fire service being involved. When you're going to try to get something like this passed throughout the council and throughout the parish, I strongly urge that you contact the local fire departments and meet with them. Everything that y'all asked Chief Stewart tonight, we could have answered that and we could have taken care of that in a committee meeting way before we ever got here tonight, and most of those questions would all be answered. I do follow most of y'all on Facebook. I missed this latest round of comments on Facebook about this. I can tell you that I can stand here as a fire chief and as a chairman of Fire District Number 1 and tell you that I'm not here to fight the ordinance. I'm just here to tell you I'm very, very disappointed that this got to this council tonight. An ordinance was drafted. I'll tell you, I met with 12 members of the parish administration a week and a half ago about 10 items across this parish dealing with fire service at a round table at the parish government building across the street. And all the items we talked about, not one item we talked about with the parish administration a week and a half ago had anything to do with a burn ordinance or anything like that. So to get a phone call from Councilman Johnson today just to say, hey, Chief, you do realize that this is on the agenda tonight. And I'm totally shocked because I got another meeting to go to where we representing volunteer firemen that have been volunteers in this parish for 30 years. We're representing them tonight and giving them awards. But I broke away from that to come here to make sure that y'all knew that how my displeasure about this coming this far without any of the fire departments being involved. And now if we want to sit back and we want to form a committee and we all want to sit around a round table and talk about everything that y'all asked Chief Stewart tonight, and we got all these other fire chiefs in the house tonight, we can all sit around a table and we can come back to this thing next month and all the answers will be answered. But it should have never got this far without us being involved. And if I sound frustrated, I am extremely frustrated. 30 years I've been doing this. To find out an hour and a half ago that this was on tonight's agenda. I'm open for any questions.
Councilman Lawler.
First of all, I apologize I didn't get in touch with you. This is a proposed ordinance. We came here to learn tonight. You know, I apologize if you think we're trying to sneak this past you. This was an educational time and for the public to also be involved. We didn't want to go plan something behind the public's back and then spring it on them. Now, if you were upset with that, I sincerely apologize for not contacting you. I did contact other people. I thought I had the right people. I didn't know what I was doing. I apologize for that. But, you know, this ordinance was not drafted for the purpose of just saying this is going to be it. It's a guideline and it's educational. And we were asking y'all to come tonight to give us some guidance on it.
With all due respect, Councilman Lawler, I was not asked to be here tonight.
No, I understand that.
Yeah,
I apologize. I didn't contact you.
So if we would have met in committee way before tonight, then this meeting would probably be over with and we would be moving forward because everything that we're talking about tonight, we could have took care of that in committee. That's all I'm trying to say. We could have took care of every single thing. I mean, I hadn't even had a chance to even read the ordinance yet. I just got a copy of it an hour ago. So, I mean, I hadn't even had a chance to even read it. So you would think that a 30-year veteran fire chief in the parish would have had the ordinance before an hour ago.
Well, as far as process goes, this is the first step. It would then go to be introduced, and then it would be
In
several
all due
weeks after that.
respect, Councilman Lawler, this is not the first step. The first step is for council members to meet with people that deal with fire every day. That's the first step. Meet with people that do this every single day. Let's sit around a round table. Let's grab some water. Let's grab a cold drink. Let's look at the ordinance, firemen and councilmen. Let's look at it together. And then we come here to this meeting and present it to the public. We didn't do that. We didn't do that. A lot of these questions tonight would be answered if we would have done that. And we didn't do that. So we're fire chiefs. We're leaders of this parish when it comes to fire service. And we're seeing the ordinance for the first time today. And it's on the agenda today. To me, that's not the first step.
Aaron, let me just interject. There is absolutely, sir, no intention, please know this, by this committee to have eliminated the fire departments, various ones, fire districts, their chiefs, from this discussion. I have to respectfully disagree. I'm very sorry you're upset as well, and have to agree with my colleague, Mr. Lawler. This is a first step, and this is typically how it's done. And after this is, again, as I said in my press remark, just a recommendation. It may be recommended tonight to defer and study it some more. It may be recommended to go forward as is. It may be recommended to go forward with X, Y, and Z amendments. And then the full council will discuss it, at which time you can be there. And again, it'll be introduced as a law if it gets even that far. Then come back and there'll be another discussion again in front of the whole full council, et cetera. So I don't think this is very different than the way I've seen it happen for the last 4 or 5 years. I don't have 30 years experience of doing my job, but I don't see it, greatly different in that regard. And we can argue all night long about, what has happened. The way I look at that now anyway is that's spilt milk. And we're just trying to do the best, sir, that we can to come up with something with all the complaints that we're getting. I'm the chairman. I could have called you. I did not, and I'll fully admit that, nor any of them. But I tell you what I did do. At the police jury meeting in Jackson Hole, I spread the news through legal counsel, through more than one of the committee members up here, Mr. Lawler just being one of them since he's been signaled out, to contact the various people. Did you get with Chief Stewart? Yes, and then I was told Mr. Whittick is going to be here as well, and so forth. So if you're left out the mix again, I can tell you this, sir, it was totally and completely innocent. And I think at this stage, what we need to do is
I agree with you.
try to, let's try to move forward. This ordinance is nothing more than 2 pages. It's almost essentially the Gonzales ordinance. it has some elements, as I've already expounded upon from the state and so forth and so on. And we are, as Mr. Lawler says, in a very, very beginning step here tonight.
And with all
I'm
due
sorry we kept you from your
with all
meeting
due respect,
and
I
the awards, et cetera.
with all due respect, I agree with you, but keep in mind, we do represent 77% of the volunteer fire departments on the East Bank. And there are 3 fire districts in this parish. One's in Donaldsonville and 2's on the East Bank. So I would ask that when we're trying to get these type of laws passed, that we include all 3 districts, not just one. And that's enough of that, and I'm ready to move on.
Mr. Lawler, you still have the floor.
Well, I have questions actually about the actual bill. Once again, I apologize. We can talk about it later. I guess some of my issues are, this was brought about due to complaints about mainly garbage being burned, not tree limbs, not that sort of thing. In your opinion, can this be regulated or reduced down to more of a garbage ordinance? And the other complaint that I get a lot is home building / development. Is that something that we could really narrow this down to make it easier on y'all?
I think the issue you're going to run into, I think we can sit down and I think we can try to work it out. But I think the issue you're going to have is you have some people in this parish that have been living in rural parts of this parish their whole entire life, and they've been burning their garbage their whole entire life. Some of them have a half acre, some of them have an acre. I think we have to be careful whenever we say that we're going to pass an ordinance across this parish-wide, and we're going to tell somebody that's lived here their whole entire life and burn their garbage their whole entire life that, hey, starting XY day, you're no longer going to be able to do that. And I think we need to, again, it goes back to, I think if we can all sit down and as a gentleman and around a round table and look at this ordinance line by line, rule by rule, I think we can make it work. But I think you're going to run into a lot of pushback from people that live in rural areas of Ascension Parish that's been burning garbage their whole life.
Is it legal in the state to burn garbage?
To my understanding, no.
So we're not telling them anything that they shouldn't be doing already.
Right.
So I mean, I don't see why that would be an issue. I mean, people aren't murdering people. It's already illegal. Just don't do it.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I think a lot of what the fire chiefs have brought out, and I don't know if it's it boils down to enforcement. Who do you get to enforce this? Right now, with state ordinance is DEQ, and getting those guys out here just doesn't happen all that often. These guys, especially as volunteers, have no enforcement authority whatsoever. So when you start talking about a burn ordinance, are we going to go out and hire code enforcement officers for the parish? Or are we going to work something through the sheriff's office? But I agree with these guys in the sense that they're basically, even though it's a burn ordinance and you immediately think of the fire service, basically what their job is going to be is some law enforcement official goes out there and says, okay, yeah, you're in violation of the ordinance, whatever the interpretation of the ordinance is. Then they call the fire department out there to put the fire out. But you run into, just like Chief Stewart said, you run into some of these construction piles that folks have out there, or they work with the homeowner or whoever to put the fire out. But once you start putting water on a pile of trees, you're making the situation worse. And part of the other issue with an ordinance like this, and what Chief Stewart alluded to as well, is that I can start this fire at 8 a.m. in the morning and the wind's blowing out of the north. 15, 20, 30 minutes, an hour or so later, it's blowing out of the east or the west and it's going in a direction I didn't mean for it to go. But now I got this 40 by 60 pile of trees that's lit and it's going. You ain't putting it out.
And that's one of my questions. In other parishes, they don't all burn their trees if they have a development. Would that be correct?
That's
they haul
correct.
them out of there.
That is correct.
And that's maybe something that we could look into,
That is
because
correct.
if we start hauling out the trees, they can also make money on that.
Mulch them up, cut them up,
Exactly.
chop them up.
I mean, there are lots of things they can do.
Yeah.
And part of the thing that I've gotten complaints on is in an established neighborhood, somebody's building a house and the workers always have this burn pile. Cars, roofs, and pools are the biggest complaints. And I know just from when I built my house, I ended up with some wonderful grass. Underneath it, we found all kind of nails and things where the burn pile was.
Right.
So it's a safety issue too, and that's what I'm trying to explore here. If there's a way to stop some of that type of thing, certainly not leaves and limbs and any debris of that sort. That's natural.
Yeah, like Councilman Johnson said, the biggest issue that we're going to face as councilmen and firefighters is trying to figure out how this is going to be enforced. Because what happens all the time, Councilman Johnson was a fire chief for many years. What happens is it's always neighbors. It's always one neighbor that's burning a pile, and he makes his neighbor, the two neighbors don't get along, so the neighbor that's not burning a pile calls, and because the neighbor next to him is burning a pile, and we go out there and they want us to put the fire out, and when we tell them he's not breaking the law, then they break out the DEQ, air quality thing and say, well, yes, we are, so it puts us in a bad situation. So I think if we can figure out how we're going to regulate this and how we're going to enforce it, I think we can move this ordinance forward, if we can figure that piece out. Because am I correct by saying that the parish currently at this time does not have a code enforcement officer, correct?
That's correct.
So
Well, for this,
That is correct, right?
at all.
So can someone speak to how is Gonzales enforcing their burn ordinance?
It has to be, I would have to guess that it has to be going through
Sheriff's
the
office.
police department, the Gonzales Police Department.
And they do or do not, to your
So
knowledge, have a
for what I
code
can
enforcement
understand,
officer?
for what I can remember, and Chief Stewart can correct me, or
I think the city
or Chief
does
Wood,
have code
but I think they have permits. I think the city has to issue a permit for anything to burn in the city. And then if they don't have a permit to burn in the city, then the city police department can come enforce the city ordinance because they don't have a permit. People think, oh, I can't burn at all in the city, but you can burn in the city if you go to City Hall and get a permit. So what happens is somebody's burning on Roosevelt Street in the city, and the police department will stop and say, hey, look, do you have a permit? And if they can't present a permit, then that's whenever the city police department enforces it in the city.
Mr. Law, are you for or against permits
Am I for or against permits?
to burn?
For burn? With all due respect, Councilman Satterley, I'm not against this ordinance. I just want to be
But if
included.
there were to be an ordinance, would you, because it's not in there now, would you like to see a language that we could recommend the legal counsel to insert? That's our job.
Yeah, I would think that if we're going to try to enforce or try to do this, if we're going to try to move this ordinance forward, I would think that if somebody on George Rouillet Road or George Lambert Road or somebody in Prairieville wanted to burn something, I would think they would need to get a permit if that's what's working in
And
the
of course,
city.
if they don't have a permit, they're in violation, but they could still have a fire with a permit and violate different aspects of the ordinance.
Correct, and
So it
here-
wouldn't stop everything.
That's-
you
but
know.
that's right.
And
The only
so
thing
the
that
code
would-
enforcement issue continues to
the only thing that would do is it would give us some kind of data on where things are burning. If we had some kind of permit system, that would tell us where the burning is taking place. But the biggest issue is going to be is who's going to pull up on George Lambert Road or Beco Road or Stringer Bridge Road and ask those people if they have a permit. And then if they don't have a permit, who's going to enforce the ordinance? That's the big thing we need to try to figure out. I'll yield to my chief steward for anything else.
Chief Stewart.
I just think to add to that, and talking, to Chief Norman and Gonzales, the permit that they have is primarily a notification thing. It allows them to know. So, what happens is somebody calls and says, hey, man, something's on fire out here on Highway 30. And we know we got somebody burning trees or something. They're clearing a lot out there. It's mainly a notification. They go out there and look and see and say, yeah, this appears to meet our ordinance. And, okay, you can burn. Just give us a call when you're going to burn and let us know as far as, I think Gonzales, the city probably has code enforcement people. Pretty sure they do. Councilman Lawler, what you were talking about, according to the state regulations, sawn wood that's been finished, sawn in any form or fashion is not allowed to be burned. I.e., so if you're a contractor building a house, you want to get rid of your scrap lumber, that doesn't fall under what's allowed. But it's been going on. I'm 54 years old. Far back as I can remember people building houses, it's been going on. But what you need to be able to do is what you did here, or what Mr. Parrington did, was pretty much mirrored the state law, with other than one exception with the 1 acre deal. You just need to put the enforcement on it. You can enforce the state laws. They're basically identical. So you just have to be able to enforce it, because if somebody is burning their 2x4s and stuff at the house they're building over in your neighborhood, and somebody calls in and says, hey, they're burning 2x4s, well, you send the code enforcement person over there and says, you can't burn that. And they write them up, and they call the fire department if that's the case, if it's a good bit going or whatever, and say, hey, need y'all to come over and put this fire out over here, and we'll go over there and put it out. Because the laws are already there. It's kind of like people talk about gun laws. Criminals aren't supposed to have them right now, but we keep wanting to pass more laws that says they can't have them. You just got to enforce the ones you got. And
Well,
I think
if we
that's where
make
we're at.
law, if we make a law, sir, let's just take police enforcement of speeding. You know, if we make a law that you can't go beyond this speed limit in this subdivision or whatever, they have to enforce it. They meaning, in this case, we're not a city, we're not incorporated, we have a sheriff's office, collects its own taxes, the whole bit. My understanding is if we make law as a council, they have to enforce the law. So in many respects, it's not the sheriff's, is APSO the code enforcement agency for this?
I would think that would be a conversation that would need to be had with the
With
sheriff.
Mr. Wally.
Yes.
I don't believe you can do that, but I'm not sure who has the floor, but are you finished, Mr.?
Yes, I'm finished.
Yeah, when we said we would go this way, so. Mr. Dawson, you've been very patient this evening.
Well, number one, we do have state law, and there's nothing to prevent the Ascension Parish Sheriff from enforcing state law. I mean, they do that all the time. They enforce federal law, they enforce state law. I mean, I don't understand the whole deal, because everything that we have here is in the state law. And, you know, if we're not enforcing that, what makes us think we're going to enforce this? And then this 1 acre deal, so what is the sheriff or Mark or James, they're gonna go out there with a measuring stick, and they're gonna say, you know, let me measure your lot before I do something with you, I need to finish.
Yeah.
And, you know, or you're gonna have to have your deed there and say, oh, look, here's my deed, I own 1.2 acres. No, I looked at that and it's point, you know, I don't get it. And I don't think it's workable. I think we need to look at the state law, and we need to see are there holes in the state law? I'm not seeing any. You know, I hear Chief Stewart saying that there's no holes in the state law. So why do we need to mirror the state law? I can't figure that out.
Are you done, Mr. Dawson?
I am.
Thank you, sir. That's a tough act to follow now, isn't it? I sort of get what you're saying. However, we have a sheriff again. And I think he would be obligated, when you say there's nothing different, but then I heard you also say there really is that 1 acre, which may or may not stand in a quote law, but I would say the sheriff would probably be much more comfortable going out and enforcing a law that was done by the local government authority than at the state level. He might even claim he doesn't have jurisdiction and needs the
Well, you
state
tell
guys to
me
come
that
in.
when they stop me for speeding on a state highway.
Well, okay. You know, like you said, we could talk all around this until we sit down with Mr. Wally and ask him, would he like to have more coverage in that or not? And then, of course, it does not, Bill, in all fairness, take care of the real issue that started this. I think Mr. Lawler would agree, because he was one of the ones that contacted me and said, yeah, we need to put this on the agenda. The subdivisions, when they build, are pretty much doing what they want, clearing 20, 30, 40 or more acres, pushing it one burn pile. These tires show up. They ignite it with some sort of an accelerant. Chief Stewart knows, I've talked to him about the Dutchtown of Hollows, and it goes on for days, and the neighbors are financially affected. And that state law was there for that, and probably, you know, something maybe could have been done, wasn't, et cetera. You know, we can conclude tonight we don't need nothing, and that's why we're here. We said we're going to discuss it. Or we do, and we need to even have some other little things in our law that are specific for what we have that aren't necessarily necessary for the state of Louisiana, including how we're going to enforce this. But anyway, I've said most of my piece. Mr. Dawson, you're done. We're going to go over here to Mr. Joseph.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. Me been through this. Y'all have been up here before, Chief. Y'all know. We tried to do this here before. And code enforcer, who gonna pay for it? The sheriff gonna ask you, who gonna pay for it? Who gonna be in charge of it? Been through all this, okay? You want a code enforcer? You pay for it, council, no problem. We have a jump card. We have a lot of ordinance that a code enforcer supposed to be responsible for it. But we don't want to hire one. We don't want that department. It's always been a money issue. Councilman Benny, if I'm wrong, you please step in, okay? So what y'all talking about is the same old thing. I have to go back with the chief over there and saying we should have sat down around the table and said, okay, who gonna be responsible for what, and how are we gonna make this ordinance real effective to the community? And I live in a rural area, and I do burn trash. But you gonna limit me to burn trash when I got a farmer, because I live in I live in a agriculture area, and they burn their sugar cane. And Mr. Lawless used a fine example. Well, you know, they get the debris in the pool. Well, I get it on my roof. I get it on my house. I get it on my cars. But the Law Pacific, I can't do nothing about that. They protect it. You know, so when you look at this ordinance, you have to look at this ordinance real fair. And then it's going to come down to, okay, you're making people get garbage, pick up garbage. Because if you stop that 1 acre burning, that they've been burning their whole life and never had a bill, here we go to the garbage ordinance now. How are we going to make that work? We've been down this road. I'm just only telling y'all that we've been down this road and it's been difficult. And if you want to do this ordinance, we have to look at it a little bit different. You know, I really didn't, I knew the ordinance was coming up, and I just didn't know certain people would not involve in it. I just, you know, I really took it for granted that, you know, everybody was on board of what the concept of this ordinance was going to do, but I'm learning tonight, a lot of us do not know a whole lot what goes on in administration with the sheriff department and our ordinance. And no offense, it's just that we have been down this road before, and it's a tough road. And I'm gonna leave it at that, and Councilman Bennett can.
Benny, I'm gonna give you the floor, but I just want to address Councilman Joseph's remarks. With all due respect, OJ, you say we've been here before, is what I've captured, and without a code enforcement, essentially paid for by this council or Ascension Parish, there's a good possibility, I guess, Sheriff Wiley wouldn't want to enforce it. If that's so, why did this committee, before many people on it here this evening hadn't even run for office yet, back when it was chaired by another gentleman, Mr. Kent Scheck-Snyder, we put together a noise ordinance replete with a threshold of 85 decibels, et cetera. And we didn't ask Sheriff Wiley or anybody, could we do that? And if so, would you enforce it? And he is enforcing it. And the reason I might add is Judge Marilyn Lambert, in a case that was in, I think Todd Lambert's or maybe Randy Kluat's district, although they called me in being on the committee, and I went out there and met with PSO and listened to the neighbors' complaints and so forth. She had thrown the case out. A bunch of motorcycle people were jumping berms and hay bales and making incredible amounts of noise right in the middle of a subdivision. Had formed a little club, et cetera. And Judge Lambert ruled that our existing law was unconstitutional because it didn't allow for anything more than a subjectivity of APSO's officer coming out and saying, I believe it's too noisy. You got to have some decibels. We stuck decibels in. I assume it's working. I haven't heard anything since. But the point being, again, Mr. Joseph, with all due respect, we don't have a code enforcement officer for noise. Are we in this parish going to have code enforcement officers for every law that we want enforced? Or is it not for, keyword, law enforcement to enforce the law? Mr. Johnson.
If I could, I'd like to, I guess, fill in the rest of the story on the noise ordinance you just mentioned. Actually, the ordinance, when I first got on the council, did have a decibel level in it, and the sheriff's office brought that to us to change because it was an arbitrary situation in the sense that every time they got out there, how far away from the noise did you have to be with the decibel meter and all that other kind of stuff. So they asked us to revise that ordinance and at the fact which we did at their request, I think we need to consult with our legal advisor as far as who actually enforces things. Because yes, I do think there are some ordinances that we adopt that the sheriff's office is obligated to enforce. Where that line breaks, and I'll use this as an example, being a former DPS police officer, going through law enforcement training, there are ordinances out there on the book, for an example, that wildlife and fisheries agents, they can enforce wildlife and fisheries laws as well as Title 32 and Title 14 laws. State police cannot enforce wildlife laws. They don't have the jurisdiction to do that. While they can do the Title 32 and the Title 14, I think it is, with the traffic laws, they can't get into the realm of the wildlife and fisheries laws. So there are some avenues that as you, and I don't know exactly what that break on it is. You'd have to consult those guys to find out. But there are things like that that may not be in the purview of the sheriff to enforce. This may be one of them. I think that's, as I said before, I think that's one of the things we have to understand is who would be the enforcement of this, whether we need a code enforcement official for the parish to do that as well as other ordinances. We did start a municipal court, if you will, or I forget the title of it, with the parish as far as handling complaints and different things that we've been trying to keep up and running. It's been a while since we've talked about it, and I'm not sure what the status of it is. We've had issues with trying to find a justice person to manage that court for us. It worked whenever we had it going, and again, I don't know what the status of it is. Haven't heard anything about it in the last several months or year or so. But what I would recommend if the body wishes is if we want to go ahead forward with this thing is set up a meeting like Chief LeBlanc recommended to bring the sheriff into it as well as our legal folks, see what out of this ordinance we like, what we don't like, what we need to change. I agree that there are some issues that are in the parish that we probably do need to look at and decide whether or not we want to address. But there's just as much pushback on the opposite end of that to say, leave me alone. I'm doing what I am doing. And part of the reason Councilman Shakeschneider, there never has been a burn ordinance is we've always had a debate behind the scenes because I personally, I wouldn't mind a burn ordinance if it was appropriately done. And it's not necessarily 100% the way I want it, but I would be accepting of it. But the problem that he always felt was you couldn't do this without a garbage ordinance. And so that's another thing that you want to look at or talk about, whether you want to break that can of worms back open again. I'm more than willing to talk about it, but that's one of those things, again, that does that play a role in this? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But I know these guys and their concern, I know I had it back in the day, like Councilman Joseph just mentioned, yeah, this isn't the first time we broached this. It was broached prior to me getting on this council. We broached it a few years back, and we couldn't solve it, or wouldn't solve it, one or the other. I'm not saying we shouldn't take another crack at it, but I think we need to understand that we are in a transition. We are a suburban-type parish, and we do have agricultural needs here. We just need to make sure that we keep this as simple as possible. I don't know if a permit is the right way to go about it, as far as what the inconvenience to the public with that would be for folks that are burning leaves and so forth and so on. I would be interested to see how that would look because I'm in the same boat. I burn leaves and limbs. I got about 2 acres that I'm maintaining between mine and my mother-in-law's house, and there's a lot of trees and stuff falling in there. And some of the stuff that's in here, I don't meet it. I ain't gonna lie to you. I'm not 1,000 feet away from a building, and I'm right on some wood lines. So, but I do watch it and try to keep it under control, so forth. But so that's what I would recommend, guys. Is let's put this on hold. Pick 1 or 2 of us to sit down and have a committee with our legal advisor as well as some representatives from the sheriff's office and the fire service, and try to hash this thing out and see if we can come up with a workable document that's acceptable then that we can present to the public and get some feedback from them on that as well.
I second that motion.
I'll make the motion on that.
Councilman
Yes, sir.
Johnson, was that a motion?
I'll make that as a motion, yes, sir.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, and let me be sure the chair understands it, to defer this to further discuss things with the sheriff's office, with the various firefighter individuals that would deem appropriate. I think I heard elements that your motion said maybe 1 or 2 of us which the chair would favor. I
Whichever
would,
the chair wants
I would,
to- yes, sir.
no, I would like to see it stay, so it doesn't drag the thing down below a quorum situation of 3. So I like 2. Is that in your motion, sir?
Yes, sir.
Did I miss anything?
No, sir.
Do I hear a second?
Yes.
It's been motioned and second that we defer this. Most motions for deferral, by the way, put a time frame. Can I ask the author if you would care to say 30 days, 60 days?
60 days.
60 days is now in the motion. Is that okay on the second? Okay. Discussion. I believe Mr. Law, discussion.
No discussion.
Sound good to me.
Move to close the discussion.
We don't need that, but I mean, hearing no.
Get it moving.
No discussion, we'll go ahead and vote. Been moved and seconded that we defer for 60 days for the reasons I've just expounded. Any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Move to adjourn.
Item number 5, moved to adjourn by Mr. Dawson, second by Mr. Johnson. This meeting is adjourned.